Father, thank you for this, every moment that we have together as a church, this one in particular, Lord, as we get to plan for the fall. Please be with us, Lord, as we consider a text today, Lord, that we probably have never really jumped into or thought much about. And I pray that you would be with us as we cover a large swath of your people's history to see what we should be doing during transition. Be with us, Lord, in your name. Amen. So we did talk about transition last week, why we go through it, what it means, and what we really focused on. Well, what I said was, I think our tendency is to see life as a basically a movement from one position of stability to the next. So we move from being sort of in what I call the German phrase was Sitz im Leben, situation in life. We move from one Sitz im Leben to another Sitz im Leben. And in between those things, that transition period is the uncomfortable part. We don't like that part. We want to move from stability to stability, but we acknowledge that there's going to be a lot of times in life where we have to go through these moments in transition. And my conclusion was that I think we need to reverse our way of thinking rather than seeing the stability of our Sitz im Leben as the desirable thing and the transition as the undesirable. I think that maybe life, especially for the Christian, is actually about living in the transitions. The stable periods of life are just pit stops between periods of transitions. They allow us to rest. They allow us to have some reprieve from change, and we all want that. But they also make us comfortable. They put us in a position where we can depend on our own means, or we can depend on what's right in front of us. Transition, on the other hand, forces us to rely on God. And so as we looked at Psalm 139, I said there was the foundation for transition in Scripture was really these three things. It was the sovereignty of God, that God knows all about our days. Every one of our days is numbered before they have yet to been, even one of them is yet to be. That God is always present, that there's nowhere we go in life where we're not going to experience God's presence, that He's not already there in front of us. And then we trust God's purposes, that each of us has been designed for the path that you are walking. That literally the psalmist David says that in the womb, God not only has that you're fearfully and wonderfully made, but it's another way of looking at it is you're fearfully set apart, that you're fearfully created for the purposes with which He has you walking right now. And so when we trust those three things, it gives us a foundation to go through these transitions and to endure it. Transition's the place where we're forced to depend on God as we move from one place of stability and comfort to the next. But there's another question, and that's what's supposed to happen during that transition? Like, what are we supposed to be working on? What are we supposed to be doing? When you go through a period of change, what should you be thinking about? When we're moving from what we know, which is our current reality, our current Sitz im Leben, to what we don't know, whatever our normal is going to be, what do we do? Because it doesn't mean we're passive. Just because God knows and we don't, doesn't mean that we just sit on our hands and go, well, whatever, we'll figure it out when we get there. There's something that we should do to prepare ourselves. And we can under-prepare, we can prepare for the wrong things, and we can over-prepare. We need to know how to prepare. An example of under-preparation, when you don't prepare enough, is like I know a few of us send high school boys off to college. If you want to talk about under-preparation, okay, have a high school boy and send him off to college. And he will leave and pack as if he's going to sleepaway camp for a week, not going away to a different state for months. He'll have 3 socks, not 3 pairs, like just 3 socks. He'll have, maybe bring bed sheets, no toothbrush, and you'd be like, where are you going? And, that's classic under-preparation, okay? Then there's examples of preparing for the wrong thing. And I've talked about this before. Particularly, I know some of you right now are looking forward to getting married. And when you get engaged, you celebrate that engagement for about 24 hours. And then you panic. And you enter this period of transition where you know definitively that the single life that you used to live is gone. No matter what, no matter how long you've been dating or whatever, you've now committed yourself to a person. But you're not legally bound yet. So you're in this weird transition period where you're trying to figure that out. And the preparations begin, and you end up preparing for 2 things, 2 upcoming situations. The first one, of course, is the preparations that go into the wedding. You have to pick a date, you have to pick a venue, pick a dress, pick food, choose a guest list, which is always hard, send out the save the dates, invites, figure out a bridal shower, maybe a bachelor or bachelorette party. Typically nowadays, it's a bachelor or bachelorette weekend because we love celebrating ourselves, and on and on. And there's all this tension because of the money. Everyone's stressed out. Whenever we go through premarital counseling, it's like the number one stressor every time you talk to couples that are about to get married, it's finances. Finance for the wedding. Who's paying for it? Wedding preparations. That's the big stress. Preparing for the wedding day. Then there's something else that you're preparing for at the same time, and that is the rest of your life together. The wedding is going to last 4 or 5 hours at most. And we put all of our energy and effort into that for a year and a half to get ready for the wedding, in almost no preparation into the fact that you are making a commitment for the rest of your life, day after day after day after day after day. Okay? 5 hours, the rest of your life. This is This is preparing for the wrong thing. This is a major problem that we have in our society. We love preparing for the wedding. We make almost no preparation for the actual marriage. And by the way, the marriage is way harder and way more expensive over the long haul. And then there's over-preparing. You can over-prepare, okay, like when you have your first kid. And I know some of you are getting ready to have your first kid. When you had the first child that came into your home, whether it was through birth or adoption or whatever, the things you think you need as having a child come into your home it's like, this is why you have a baby shower. Because it's like thousands of dollars worth of stuff that everybody tells you need, and most of it you're not going to use. What you really need are like diapers, because babies don't stop in that area. And so you just need diapers upon diapers upon diapers. The rest you can pretty much handle. People have handled having a baby for tens of thousands of years without like that little wind-up thing where you put your diapers in it and you're supposed to like wind it up, and then it's like the diaper buddy or something like that. You do that for like a month, and you're like, you're just throwing them in the trash can. You're like, who cares? We'll get rid of that when we get rid of it, all right? You can under-prepare. You can prepare for the wrong things. You can over-prepare. What are you supposed to be doing? What does the Bible say? How does the Bible say you should be preparing? That's really the question we want to look at. And so to get there, we're going to jump into the story of Israel at the beginning of the book of Deuteronomy. So let me read this text from Deuteronomy 1. These are the words that Moses spoke to all Israel beyond the Jordan in the wilderness, in the Arabah opposite Suf, between Paran and Tophel, Laban, Hazeroth, and Dizahab. It is 11 days' journey from Horeb by the way of Mount Seir to Kadesh Barnea. In the 40th year, on the first day of the 11th month, Moses spoke to the people of Israel according to all that the Lord had given him in commandment to them, after he had defeated Sihon, the king of the Amorites, who lived in Heshbon, and Og, the king of Bashan, who lived in Ashtaroth and in Edrei. Beyond the Jordan, in the land of Moab, Moses undertook to explain this law, saying, "The Lord our God said to us in Horeb, you have stayed long enough at this mountain. Turn and take your journey, and go to the hill country of the Amorites, and to all their neighbors in the Arabah, in the hill country, and in the lowland, and in the Negeb, and by the seacoast, the land of the Canaanites in Lebanon, as far as the great river, the river Euphrates. See, I have set the land before you. Go in and take possession of the land that the Lord swore to your fathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, and give to them and their offspring after them." There's certain transition periods of life that you know are coming. And when those transition periods come, it's common to actually, the most stress happens like right before the transition because you know it's coming. So graduating high school, for example, you know you're going to graduate, and then your senior year, you want to have fun, but if you're preparing correctly, there's also a period of stress because you realize this is it. This is my last year. There's other transitions, graduating from college and other things that's happening. But one of the transitions for me was turning 40, and because I knew that was a number that was out there, right? Everybody, like 40 is this number that we just arbitrarily picked, right? And we say that's the date that you're going to have this crisis where no matter how successful you are, you're going to think of yourself as a failure. Okay, so that's going to happen when you turn 40. And so I kind of knew this was coming, but turning 40, despite the fact that on my 40th birthday, there was a lot going wrong. It was like 99 degrees outside, 108, heat index, and my air conditioning broke in my house on my birthday. And I'm like, this is not cool. And then through a variety of circumstances, including the fact that now our home was 108 degrees on the inside, there was a flea infestation. It was like a whole thing, okay? So that was stressful, but not nearly as stressful as my 39th birthday. Because when I turned 39, what I realized is I'm entering the 40th year. Like, this is the year where now I'm looking and going, hey, I had all these goals I wanted to accomplish before I was 40, and now I'm in my 40th year, and I'm looking at that date as like the date that, have I done all the things that I wanted to do by the time I turn 40? So that 39th year, the 40th year, 39 years gone, now I'm in the 40th year of my existence, and there's all this stress that's building up because I'm thinking about whether or not have I learned enough? Have I done everything that I was supposed to? And it got me thinking, I don't know if you know this, but the number 40 is very prominent in Scripture. It's brought up frequently, the number 40. There's 40 days of rain in the great flood in the story of Noah. In the story of Moses' life is divided into 3 40-year periods. He spends 40 years in Egypt, 40 years in the wilderness by himself, and then 40 years leading the actual Israelites. Fast forward to the life of Jesus. Jesus spends 40 days in the wilderness. And there's many other examples of 40s in the Bible. And as I thought about them, I remember thinking, what were they feeling as they entered the 40th year? Like, the Israelites are here. God has told them, you're going to spend 40 years in the wilderness. They know that. They know now they're entering the 40th year. They know that whatever God had promised them after that, the transition into the new land was coming. What are they thinking about as they get into the 40th year? Are they thinking about whether they had learned all their lessons? Like, what are we supposed to do next? I mean, there's probably all these thoughts that are happening that aren't that dissimilar to how I felt when I entered my 40th year of my own life. And so it says right here in Deuteronomy 1:3, and this is what I love, it says, in the 40th year. On the first day, 11th month, Moses spoke to the people of Israel. He tells them in the 40th year. So I want to highlight 3 things that Moses does in the 40th year that he talks to them about. How do we prepare ourselves in times of transition? And so, how did we get here? This is the first thing. We need to recount where we've been. How did we get here? This is the first thing that Moses does with the people. He says it's the 40th year, and this is what he says. Now, we can go to that text, verse 3 to 4. In the 40th year, on the first day of the 11th month, Moses spoke to the people of Israel according to all that the Lord had given him in commandment to them. After he had defeated Sihon, the king of the Amorites, who lived in Heshbon, and Og, the king of Bashan, who lived in Ashtaroth and in Edrei. The author is placing this speech of Moses that he's going to give, where he's going to recount the journey that they'd gone on. He places it in a very specific spot in context. It's the first day of the 11th month of the 40th year. The Israelites have gathered on the eastern side of the Jordan River and are poised to enter the land of Canaan. And in order to get there, they've had a series of battles which they've won in order to claim that land. And then Moses goes into this speech. And so what the speech consists of is actually telling the story of how they end up defeating Sihon and Og, the king of Bashan. So over the next 3 or 4 chapters, he's going to tell this story. So right now, though, the author is telling us that Moses is giving the speech he's about to give after all of these events had actually happened. And so if we look at a map here, it's going to show us kind of a little bit of what happened along the way and where they actually are. By the time they're speaking, they're in that position there called the number 12. But when they come up, in the way he recounts the story, Moses begins by telling about, I took you out of Egypt. He says, I appointed leaders for you immediately. That's the first thing I did, appointed leaders from among your clan, because I realized there were too many of you. Brings them to the land God had promised. So they come up there and spying out the land. Number 5, he leads them up there to the land. They see the land, and then they chicken out. So they refuse to go in. They're afraid. So God sends them out into the wilderness for 48 years. You can see there at the bottom. That's the map would go further if we had more space, but that's where they kind of wander around Mount Sinai for 40 years, 38 some odd years before they start moving up. And then God instructs the people to turn north towards the land he had promised, and they go through these lands southwest of Israel, or southeast of Israel rather, and they go all the way up, and they pass through a lot of lands. God says, don't mess with these people because they're my people. I gave them this land. And then he says, but you are going to defeat the person who lives in Heshbon and the person who lives in Bashan, and you're going to take all that land. And so this is what happens. This is the story that Moses recounts. And then he ends up there at number 12, and that's where he gives them this speech. And he says, I'm going to tell you, again, I'm going to recount for you all that God has done. And so here's what I want to take away from this as we work through our own transitions. Are you working through what God has done? How did you get here? How did you get to the particular place of transition that you are? The story that Moses reminds the people of has 2 important aspects to it. It's their own distrust of God and their cowardice, but it's also a reminder of God's faithfulness. God had demonstrated his faithfulness to the people and his promise to fight for them against their enemies by allowing them to defeat these 2 kings just before they enter the promised land. And those are the 2 things we need to take stock of. What have you done that's gotten you where you are? What are the choices you've made for good and for bad that have gotten you to the place of transition? And then also, where's God's faithfulness? But the first question, what have we done? Because even though for Israel, Israel had been disobedient to God, so it's sort of a negative assessment, but how you got here doesn't need to be a negative question. You're in a position you're in because of choices that you made. If you've been married for a long time, there are times in marriage where, you go, how did I get here? The challenging times, in your marriage. And you have to remember, well, wait a second. I made a decision to marry this person. I made vows in front of my friends and family and everyone that we invited. And that's why we ask for witnesses at a wedding, to say, you all are here as witnesses to this vow so that people can remind you, you made this choice. You're in this for the long haul. When you have kids, you're going to have your child, you're going to be really excited, and then you're going to get really tired for a while. And you're going to be like, this feels like maybe we didn't think this through. And then you're going to remember, no, you did think this through. You made a choice to have this child. And so there, the period of engagement, again, you're going to have that. All of these things, you're going to go through transition, and part of the preparatory work that you do is evaluating how you got where you are. But the second part is equally important. How has God demonstrated his faithfulness up to this point? If it's true that the circumstances of transition are the place where we're forced to depend on God, then it will be equally true that as you look at your life, you will see the places where God has consistently been faithful. How has God led me through previous transitions? How has God led me through previous challenges? And so that's the first thing. How did we get here? But that leads to a second thing that we need to ask ourselves. We need to assess what's required moving forward. So here's what Moses says in Deuteronomy 4. And now, O Israel, listen to the statutes and the rules that I'm teaching you and do them, that you may live and go in and take possession of the land the Lord, the God of your fathers, is giving you. You shall not add to the word that I command you, nor take from it, that you may keep the commandments of the Lord your God that I command you. Your eyes have seen what the Lord did at Baal Peor, for the Lord your God destroyed from among you all the men who followed the Baal of Peor. But you who held fast to the Lord your God are all alive today. See, I have taught you statutes and rules as the Lord my God commanded me, that you should do them in the land that you are entering to take possession of it. Keep them and do them, for that will be your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the peoples who, when they hear all these statutes, will say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. For what great nation is there that has a God so near to it as the Lord our God is to us whenever we call upon him? And what great nation is there that has statutes and rules so righteous as all this law that I set before you today? He goes on to say that you need to take care to teach them to your children, that don't let this fade away. You must obey the Lord. And then he says this in Deuteronomy 4, what you should avoid. Therefore, watch yourselves very carefully. Since you saw no form on the day that the Lord spoke to you at Oreb out of the midst of the fire, beware lest you act corruptly by making a carved image for yourself in the form of any figure, the likeness of male or female, the likeness of any animal that's on the earth, the likeness of any winged bird that flies in the air, the likeness of anything that creeps on the ground, the likeness of any fish that is in the water under the earth. And beware lest you raise your eyes to heaven, and when you see the sun and the moon and the stars, all the host of heaven, you be drawn away and bow down to them and serve them, things that the Lord your God has allotted to all the peoples under the whole heaven. But the Lord has taken you and brought you out of the iron furnace, out of Egypt, to be a people of his own inheritance as you are this day. Furthermore, the Lord was angry with me because of you, and he swore that I should not cross the Jordan and that I should not enter the good land that the Lord your God is giving you for an inheritance. For I must die in this land. I must not go over the Jordan, but you shall go over and take possession of that good land. Take care lest you forget the covenant of the Lord your God, which he made with you, and make a carved image, the form of anything that the Lord your God has forbidden you. For the Lord your God is a consuming fire, a jealous God. And then similarly, he goes on to say, this is what you must teach your children. So again, what he offers them is an assessment of what's required of them moving forward. Assessing what is required. What do I need to do moving forward? Moses' command to the people consists of these two broad categories of what they need to do. The first is obey the Lord. Follow the instructions of the Lord. Live the way that God has called you to live, because when you do that, all the nations of the Lord will look to you and say, now this is a nation, who is this nation that has a God so close that he answers them when they call? And the way that he presents obedience to the Lord is worth considering, because what he says is, if you're obedient to the Lord, you will become great. You will become a great nation. In your obedience, other nations will look to you and say, this nation must be incredible to have a God who would be so close to it. But what you're to avoid, the other broad category, is idolatry, which begs the question of why is idolatry the thing that they're prone to do, to disobey God through the act of idolatry. Now, one of the reasons is, and the way it's spoken about here is very clearly in the form of a carved image, like an actual idol that you would craft out of the goods of the earth. And the reason for that is twofold. Number one, because he says when God showed up to you in the mountain, he didn't give you a form. You knew God was there, but you didn't see God. So he didn't present to you a physical form of what he looked like. But the second reason is because they were going into a land where they did have a variety of different idols. You know, they had Asherah poles, they had other Baals that they would legitimately worship. And so what he's saying to the people is when you go into the land, don't get tempted by worshiping the things that the other people of the world worship. Don't worship those things. It was a very real temptation for them to begin to worship actual idols, images of who God is, like the calf in the wilderness that they made after God gave them the Ten Commandments. But the bigger reason that idolatry was going to be the temptation was because Moses knew that if people were obedient to God, then the mission was going to be successful. And they were going to conquer the land. And as he says everywhere else, they were going to inherit vineyards that they didn't plant. They were going to inherit houses that they didn't build. You were going to walk into cities that you didn't organize. They're going to come out of the other side of this flush with crops, flush with livestock, houses. Their campaign would be a success if they trusted in God. So what's the temptation? The temptation is that you're going to look around and you're going to think, I did this. I made this happen. I'm the one who did all the things around me. The temptation was going to be that they were going to ascribe all their success to something other than the one true God, and that's the epitome of what idolatry is. Idolatry is giving credit or honor or praise to something other than God. It's saying something else is the thing of most importance in my life, something, whether that's me or whatever. It's saying that's the thing I'm going to worship, and that's our biggest temptation and struggle when we come out the other side of transition. Whether it's something good that's happening in your life or something negative. It's pretty easiest for us to go through a transition, even difficult ones, and end up on the other side thinking that we were the ones responsible for getting us there. And feeling very good at ourselves for making it through that transition. And I've seen people go through terrible situations in their life, transitions in their life that they caused because of their own poor choices, like sin or whatever it was, and it blew up their life. And it happened publicly, and dumb decisions rocked their world, and almost immediately, after they had just a little space from it, they thought to themselves, I knew I could do it. I'm going to get myself through this. I'm going to pick myself up by my own bootstraps. And they feel like, I'm out of this, and they begin to present themselves as the hero of their own story. Even though you're like, but you did this. Like, you're not the hero. The hero is the God who gets us through even our dumb choices, who protects us from the full consequence of our error at times. But you're not the hero of your own story. But we're so tempted to put ourselves in that position. So we need to be obedient, and we need to avoid idolatry. But part of being obedient to God isn't just obeying His law, but it's also asking ourselves, and using this period of preparation and this transition is a place where we assess what we need to do moving forward. Obedience to God looks like ensuring that we're ready for whatever position He's going to put us in. Think of our preparations during transition as something like being a backup quarterback in football in the NFL. When you're the backup quarterback is like the easiest and the hardest job that you can have in really any professional sport. It's the easiest job because a lot of Sundays you just put on your uniform, you strap up, you stand there with a clipboard, and you just go, hey, good job, buddy, to the starter. And you just whisper sweet nothings in his ear through your microphone and encourage him after he just got pounded by some massive, lineman. And you go, and so, you're like, but mostly you're just standing there and you go home and you take your uniform off, fold it up, and put it back in your locker because you're like, that's not dirty. The problem is that your number might be called. On any given Sunday, you got to be ready to go. You have to put in the same work as a starter, the same prep. You have to know the playbook. You have to know what the other team's doing. You have to know all these things because at any given moment, your number might be called and you got to walk in. You don't know if it's going to happen, but if you're good at what you do, every week, you have to prepare to go and perform at the highest level when and if your number is called. And I think something like that is the sort of preparation we should be doing during seasons of transition. We don't always know what the end result is going to be. We don't know where it's leading, but we need to assess what we do know and then figure out how we can be diligent in preparing for that. How can we be obedient and be in preparing for the potential outcome? If you're anticipating going through like a leadership transition at work or in another area of your life, maybe part of the preparation process is figuring out what areas you need to grow in to make sure you're ready for whatever that holds. It could be pursuing additional education. Could be getting certified in something that you're not doing yet, but you think you might do, being ready to go. It could be gaining knowledge in an area you currently don't have knowledge in. It could be adjusting your schedule, right? Like as we go through this period of transition I've talked about where we move from, it's a small one that happens every year. We go from summer into the school year. We know our routines are going to change. We know our schedules are going to change. Most of us. Okay, my kids are going to have to go to sleep earlier because it's not the summer. We're all going to have to wake up earlier, get everybody out the door. Like that's a transition that's coming. And so it's a good idea to start preparing yourself for when that changes. Or if you're a parent and you have young kids, and right now you're like, this is great. They go to bed at 8:30. Well, guess what? They're going to get older. And that time, what you used to have with your husband or wife for 2 hours after your kids go to bed, that's going to go away. And so you're going to have to figure out other ways of adjusting your schedule in order to prepare for that. You need to know. So just start thinking about that now. You might not need to change it now, but you need to know that those times are coming. Again, if you've had a child or you're about to, you need to prepare your house differently. You need to prepare your existing children, the ones who are already born, to have a newborn in the house. You need to think about all these things. There's a lot of practical steps of preparation that you can take for when your number is called or when it comes. All of them are important during times of transition. What will be required of me moving forward that I know of, and some that I don't know precisely, but I want to try to anticipate that I can prepare for. So that's the second thing. Number one, we ask ourselves, how did we get here? Number two, we assess what is required of us moving forward. But there's a third thing that happens right here, and I have to admit it sort of perplexed me. Because as I was reading it, I thought, why did Moses do that right here at this time of the story? Why is this even in the text? Before the main conquest of Canaan has happened, Moses gives this speech, and then he commands this in Deuteronomy 4, verse 41. Then Moses set apart 3 cities in the east beyond the Jordan, that the manslayer might flee there. Anyone who kills his neighbor unintentionally without being in enmity with him in time past, he may flee to one of these cities and save his life. Bezer in the wilderness on the tableland for the Reubenites, Ramoth in Gilead for the Gadites, and Golan in Bashan for the Manassites. Then I'm thinking, okay, Moses has just reminded the people why they are where they are. He's talked about obedience to God and God's faithfulness. He's distributed land. He's prepared the people to enter the land of Canaan. And then all of a sudden he goes, I'm going to put these cities of refuge in place. That's what they're called. I'm going to put these cities of refuge in place right now. These cities of refuge are places where someone who commits unintentional murder or other acts, who didn't have any prior beef with that person, this is not premeditated murder, okay, this is an act of unintentional murder, he can run to and be protected from any sort of vindictive acts against them. And the reason I found that odd at this particular juncture is because he's calling the people to be obedient to God, but he's also acknowledging the negative eventuality that at some point someone's going to kill you. Someone's going to kill somebody. Could be intentional, could be unintentional, but at some point murder is going to happen. And so even though he's talking again just about unintentional murder here, he's still saying unintentional murder is going to happen. Like you can all of a sudden maybe find yourself at odds with somebody who you haven't had odds with at any point, and you start fighting and maybe you accidentally kill the guy. Like, or what are you going to do? Or there's other examples of like maybe your livestock accidentally runs off the road. You're following your donkey in a cart and it goes off the road and you hit somebody and you kill him. Like all of these things, unintentional murder. Why did he do that right now? Why would he set up this sanctuary specifically for those people? And then I thought about it more and I thought, oh, I know why. Why would Moses, of all people, before he enters the land of Canaan, as he's already distributed land, why would Moses go, here's something that I'm going to protect. I'm going to provide protection so that the person can be saved who has committed unintentional murder. Because that was Moses' story. That's why he sets him up. Because Moses' whole story is that when he leaves Egypt, the reason he's forced to leave Egypt after living there for 40 years is because he goes and he sees this slave master oppressing one of the slaves, gets angry. He's got no beef with the guy before that, but he gets angry seeing what's happening and seeing the oppression, and he fights him, and he ends up killing him. And then somebody sees him and calls him out, so Moses runs, and he takes refuge in the wilderness for 40 years. And he takes refuge until everybody who remembered that he had done that dies. And then he goes back and he brings the people out of Israel. So now that he's going to the land of Canaan, again, another 40 later, so he's roughly 120 years old. And he says, the act of grace that I'm going to bestow upon the people that are coming after me, the act of grace I'm going to bestow as I go into this new land, as you go into this transition that he says I can't follow you on, but you're going into it, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to set up protections for those who have committed unintentional murder, because when I did that, I received refuge. And now I'm going to pass it on to others. And I think that points to the thing that we need to do during periods of transition. We need to identify the grace we've been given and be prepared to give it to others. As we go through it, we figure out why we got where we are, we assess what we need to do moving forward, but we also need to identify the grace that we've been given and be prepared to give it to others. Because before the conquest starts, he says all these things and he puts this in place, and he's saying, this is the kind of people I want you to be. Because this is the way that I personally related to the God who met me in the burning bush. I related to him because I had been the person who fled for unintentional murder. And then God met me and chose me. And then God met you and chose you. And now God has chosen us to be people who choose others. He says, go out there and give that grace. And I think this might be the toughest thing to honestly assess and prepare for in our own eyes, in our own lives, is looking at ourselves and saying, where can I be a person who offers more grace to others? How is this moment of transition that I'm in leading me to be a more compassionate and kind person that reflects the heart of God who loves me unconditionally. Because sometimes transition, especially when you go through difficult transitions, can lead you the opposite way. And I can speak to this from my own life. There was a season of our lives where we went through some really tough stuff kind of all at once. We were going through a long and difficult, lengthy process of adoption. My dad had cancer, which he would eventually die from. In the midst of all of this, I lost my job, and it just felt like everything was crashing down. And then eventually, that season of transition passed, and we knew without a doubt the only thing that got us through was the grace of God. We absolutely knew that. God's grace that got us through. But then there was also a part of us, and maybe you have experienced this, where people would come up and they would start talking about things that we felt like were, let's just say, lesser sorts of transitions. And instead of being more grace-filled and compassionate because of what we had gone through, sometimes we sort of felt like, get over it. That's not like we've gone through worse than that, and we made it out the other side. So, like, why don't you just chill? And again, we knew God had gotten us through. But that's the battle that goes on in your heart, where you still have this place of wanting to make an idol out of yourself rather than trusting God. You know, and every transition in your life is an opportunity to grow into a more grace-filled person. If you are entering high school as a freshman, and you go through that transition, it can be difficult. But what it should do in your heart is not like make you go, boy, I can't wait till someone else is a freshman and then I can pick on them, which is what sometimes happens. But it should make you more compassionate so that as you become an older classman and you look back on the freshman, you become a person of grace to them and a safe place because it was a challenge for you. When you go to college, you find yourself in a new environment, you feel the anxiety of being away from home in a new school. It should make you a person who has compassion for others going through that same thing. When you get married, it's going to require that you become a person of grace. It's easy to love the person that you're engaged to because no matter how much you think that you know them, you don't know them nearly as well as you're going to know them. And you just think to yourself, they're great. I love this. It's so, I love this person. Guess what? It's going to require a lot more grace than you could possibly anticipate when you get married, like the first day. When you have kids, it's great though. I love it. When you have kids, you're going to have grace for your kids. And you're going to have grace for your spouse as you navigate that together. When your kids get older and leave the house, you have to have grace for them because the choices they make in their life are going to be different from the choices you had hoped. They're not all going to align with what you had hoped that they would do. When your parents are getting older and they get stuck in their ways, it's going to require grace. They're going to require more attention from you than maybe you have to give. It's going to require grace. Every transition you go through personally, professionally, or in any other scenario is God's design for you to become a more grace-filled person. And it's tough. Because it's tough to want to do that sometimes. But are you looking for ways that you can grow in grace as you go through whatever transition you're going through? And are you prepared to submit yourself to God's leading in these moments? We aren't passive during periods of transition. Periods of transition are God's method of preparing us for the next phase that we're entering. And in those moments, we need to reflect on how we got here. We need to reflect on how to get ready for what's next. And we need to look for the moments of grace so that we can be more grace-filled people. That is our call in moments of transition. And that is the message of the gospel. Let's pray. Father, thank you for allowing us to reflect on this text today. I pray, Lord, that the words of the author of Deuteronomy, the words of Moses that he has spoken to the people would become words that move forward thousands of years into our own lives, and we see how they are applicable, Lord, the ways that we can take them and apply them, the things that we can do as we go through our own transitions, whatever they are. Be with us, Lord, as we respond now and worship. In your name I pray. Amen.